You should told me that when you got outside. Cool. Yeah.
I'm Jake with HHA Sports, and today we're going to talk a little bit about our dovetail sights and how they're going to fit on the new Mathews V3X. So as you'll see, I have a Tetra Max Tournament Edition sight on this 33-inch V3X. All of our dovetail sights, the Tetra and the Tetra Max, will fit on the V3X. Also, in the next couple of weeks, you'll see us come out with a shorter dovetail version. It'll just be our short bar version, which will also fit on the V3X on both the 29 and 33-inch model. One question that we've gotten pretty frequently lately is the windage adjustments on your Tetra and Tetra Max bow sights on the new Mathews bow. And this year we came out with the infinite adjust plate, which you'll see on the front end of your sight. So when you
All right, folks. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Bucks of America podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Vance. Tonight's guest is the urban bow hunter. Let me correct that. Urban whitetail hunter out of Pennsylvania. I got Matthew Korbanic online here. Now, I've never met anybody or talked to anybody that actually is able to hunt in an urban surrounding, because it can be very dicey, and there's things that you have to go through to be able to achieve it. And I'm going to allow him to explain it. Now, he's based out of Pennsylvania, and so he's going to be able to, he's going to talk about what he has to go through to be where he's at. But we're going to do like my normal routine. We're going to talk about how he became where he is today and how he's gotten to this point, and like some of the trials and tribulations and where he's going from here. So without further ado, I'm just going to let Matt explain to you his inspiration, his hunting experiences, his stories. So nice thing is this is going to be on YouTube. So go make sure you go like and subscribe, and then find his stuff on Instagram. So it won't be hard to find that, because I just literally read off his handle at Urban Whitetail Hunter. So go find him on Instagram. So Matt, tell us about you.
Sure. I grew up here in Pittsburgh, and but what was interesting was I was based here in the suburban area, but most of my family lived in the outdoors. So, for example, my grandfather was the superintendent of Presque Isle State Park up in Erie. So that's kind of where I fell in love with the outdoors, because he lived on the park. So, it was a lot of fishing. We did some duck hunting. We did some different types of hunting up there on the park. As well as my grandfather on my dad's side. I mean, he was a steel worker, took early retirement, and he moved up in the Laurel Highlands. And that was what he did, is that, with all that spare time up in that Ligonier, Seven Springs area, he did a lot of hunting. And, that's kind of where I started. And then, of course, I met my wife and had, have a daughter. And probably about 10 years ago, I got back into it. And, I was always fascinated with bow hunting. That's what my grandfather up in Rector did. And I just, was walking into a box store one day, and I mentioned to my wife, you know what, I want to start doing this again. Picked up all the gear, and that's where I started getting into the urban area, just because, with what I do for a job, it's hard to find time to get out up north and into the middle of the state to, go out there and go hunting. So, I found out some little tiny thickets of area in this urban, that around here in Pittsburgh, and, started hunting those little spots. So, that's kind of how I started getting into it.
So what, you said you got back into it about 10 years ago. What put everything on pause between when you're in your youth to when you started back up about 10 years ago, 15 years ago?
My grandfather, so my dad really wasn't a hunter. He really wasn't into it at all.
Okay.
So, when my grandfathers both kind of passed away, my grandfather up in Erie, he kept going even through retirement. And whenever my uncle retired and he moved to Orlando, and then he passed away, and then my grandfather up in the mountains passed away. That was kind of the thing that kind of, I really didn't have that going on. And it was around the same time I graduated from high school. I started going to college. I didn't really have the time to do that. And then, I met my wife and we got married and had kids. And then, whenever the kids start getting a little older, that's when it was like, hey, I actually have time to do this now. So yeah, that's kind of how it, it paused for a while.
Nice. And then when it comes down to metro hunting, you're actually hunting in Pittsburgh. Is that what I'm understanding? Or are you hunting in like a suburb area?
In the suburbs. So yeah, so like if you were to look at a map, it's really difficult to get into the city. Now, I do belong to a group. Now, we are called Whitetail Management, and it's kind of a hunting club. And what we do is we will hunt in the park system just to cut down on the deer herd.
Okay.
So what you do with that is that, you pay the $60, $75 and you have to cover, the insurance and all these things that everything, that the park system requires for us to have. So we all pull in on the insurance. And you have to go through a shooting test, a very simple test, like shooting an 8 on a 3D target, 20 yards.
Okay.
You got to be able to shoot 3 arrows. So I wouldn't really call that. If you couldn't do that, you probably shouldn't be bow hunting.
Valid. I was wondering if now this test, is this sanctioned by the insurance company or the city or the county? How does that?
It's done. So yeah, it's run by the group. So we have so there are probably 6 or 7 park areas around Pittsburgh.
Okay.
So like, for example, my area is in Boyce Park. I don't know exactly how big it is. And what they do is they'll break it up into 22 different areas of like 50 acres. And then they'll say, this is your area, that's your area, and this is your, so on and so forth. And then out of there, you have a site manager. And each park has a site manager. And then there's one guy that runs the whole organization, and he reports to the Pittsburgh City Council. So he will turn in like harvesting reports and so on and so forth. So that group runs the testing and the background checks, because that's another thing that they will do is they will run a background check on your licenses to see if you've ever been flagged for, in Pennsylvania, it's illegal to hunt over bait, hunting past hours, anything like that. You can't have any type of within reason. I think one guy is in the group and he got flagged 2 years ago for, I think his bass that he caught was 11 7/8 inches and not 12. So they did flag him for that. But the group will let stuff like that slide. But yeah, that you have to have a clean hunting record and pass the shooting test.
Well, that's nice. So when was your club created?
That I'm not too sure about. As far as I know, some of the guys have been doing this for 25, 30 years. The site manager, I was actually invited to do this because I placed in a top 10 in a regional 3D tournament. And one of the guys there recognized me from my shooting club and said, hey, we got this group going on. I think this would be a good fit for you. But as far as I know, probably about 30 years.
Okay. So do you know how this came about then? Because this is pretty interesting that a club was able to, like, somebody had the imagination to start going through the emotions and creating this so many years ago.
So one of the things that in the suburban areas is it's getting really overpopulated with deer. So I think that's kind of where it started. Because I mean, if you walk through my area, it's pretty well eaten down to the dirt. I mean, the park system is very overpopulated. And then there's other small sections in town where they have been for years trying to deal with their deer population. Because a lot of people seem to think, and, a friend of mine just asked me about this earlier in the season, probably about October. He had a bunch of deer just standing in the street and people were just driving around them with cars. They're not even moving anymore. And he asked me about that. And I said, yeah, that's the problem. Whenever they get overpopulated, they get desensitized to people. They'll, nose through trash. They'll get poisoned, all kinds of things that we all hear about. And I said, that's where you need to approach an organization like us and say, hey, we can come in, hunt your parks, and kind of cut down on the deer herd.
So now when you set up for your hunt, and are you able to put in tree stands, or do you have to use blinds? What are the rules on that?
So we can put up a lock-on stand. It has to be pretty well hidden in the park. Because we're supposed to be doing this under what they call the cover of darkness, meaning, they don't want anybody seeing us up in the trees or anything like that. Lock-on stands, they're okay. You do have to take off the bottom 12 feet of your stand. No ladder stands, no blinds. So you're pretty much, a lot of guys are working with climbers. And I did this year, as we're starting to get into the saddle hunting. Mm-hmm. Because that's so much easier to maneuver and get around and, up into those trees and stuff like that with the saddles. It's a lot easier. But pretty much everything is mobile hunting in that area, in that spot.
Which makes sense then. Oh, so there are other areas that are more have permanent fixtures in? Because I was a little confused. Is that what everybody's moving towards, or some people still doing the climbers? Or
the older guys will stick to the climbers, and so, I mean, if you looked in the park, what they don't want you to do is to set up, I think the rule is like 10 yards, no closer than 10 yards to a walking path.
All right.
But there are sections where, you may go over the hill and have a couple hundred yards before you get to a highway or something. And down there, they don't really care. You can put up some, ladder stands or something down there. They just don't want anybody to see it.
Mm-hmm. Plus, it's like you don't want anybody climbing up on there, because if a kid happens to climb up there and falls off, where does that insurance? Does that fall on the owner of the stand, or does that fall on the park? That really opens up a gray area that nobody wants to deal with that conversation.
Right. That's why, I was just talking to my site manager yesterday about, there's a good spot where it's a really large tulip tree. I can't get my climber around it. I'm not too sure if I could get my strap around it for my saddle to put the sticks on it. And I asked him, can I hang a lock-on stand? And he said, that area is really close to like a soccer field. And he said, I don't like that idea because you may have kids roaming around there. He said, why don't you just try to find another tree?
Yeah, makes perfect sense. The unique thing is that over the last couple of years, like the saddle hunting has really picked up, which is kind of strange because we've been having saddles ever since we've been climbing trees and hanging up telephone lines. It's like, I wonder why it's taken so many years to get to where we're at today with saddle hunters.
That's an interesting question, because I may have some insight into this, because in this group, you have some of the younger guys that are coming in, because I met, these guys, like I said, about 3-4 years ago, and I'm bringing in some of my friends to do it too. And a lot of these older guys that are there, and they'll see us up there in these saddles, and they don't get it. They just think they're more comfortable with, like I said, a lock-on stand or a climber. Mm-hmm. And I keep telling these guys, trust me, if you put on a saddle, it's more comfortable than sitting up in a lock-on. To me, it is. I love it. I think it's fantastic.
And the flexibility to be able to quickly turn around the trees and such, and manipulate yourself with the wind and the sun and such like that. So I find that they're pretty neat. I'm not a heights person. And so it's like, my wife gave me the permission to pull a trigger on a ground blind, but here in Wisconsin, there have plenty of opportunities to go hunting. And I don't know if we have honestly, I don't know if we have clubs that allow us to do that have made agreements with the well, what would you call it? Would it be the Parks and Recs? Pretty much. I don't know if anybody here has actually come up with an agreement to do it. Now, you said this is a club. Now, is this invite only, or can any guy can apply? What is the process in getting into this club?
That's a good question. It's very secretive because they do have now. I'm trying to think. Like on the eastern side of the city, we don't have very much of an anti-hunting sentiment in the park system. I've never run into anybody who approached me and started yelling. I've had, and getting into the whole urban thing, I get approached a lot with the anti-hunting sentiment. People will just come up and approach you and start yelling at you. Up north, so if you were to look at Pittsburgh, up in the northern area, heading more towards Erie, as the suburban area kind of expands that way, there's more parks up there, and they really have an issue with that up there. I've heard some crazy stories of some of those parks from the site managers up in the parks up there. So they try to keep it pretty down low. They don't want anybody to know about it because they don't want anybody coming out and bothering anybody, or just causing a big problem. They don't want that. So it's, it's kind of like, if somebody who's in the club, they'll tell you when the test day is and where you go in and do the interview and all that stuff. But like, there isn't a website or anything.
Yeah, I would be, if I was the club president, to keep on that deal, because I don't know if you've looked at what's going on out west, because out west in Arizona and in Colorado, there's bills that are trying to be passed to eliminate predator hunting, and which is they're going after bobcats, lynx, mountain lions, and bears. And so it's like, that is something that they're dealing with on both those states. And then if you go up a little further, you go into Utah. Now they've gone away and they've taken away the ability for people on private and on public to use trail cameras. Now, anybody that's paid attention to the Sportsman Alliance, those guys, their whole goal is to fight these in court to keep them, to allow us to have this, because once they start chipping away, they're going to start taking away from everything. And that's the worst part about it. They'll just keep going and going and going. Now with your guys' organization, you got that exact same philosophy. It's like, you need to keep this quiet. You need to keep this nice and tight. Now, do you guys have support from the local DNR or from the police officers? Because I'm assuming, like you said, you've heard stories of people being unruly.
Absolutely. Yes. I run into, Allegheny County Police does the park system.
Okay.
And that I'm in there, we have parking passes and little tags that we put on our dashboard so that they know, we're in there. And those guys are fantastic. I mean, I've been in there coming out of a tree stand in the dark, and I've seen flashlights, and these guys come in just to make sure I'm okay. But I mean, they'll just stop and ask you, did you get anything? Sometimes they'll help you drag them out. The police, the one thing that I know about the police in this area is that they really support the Game Commission with the hunter harassment laws. So, yeah, I mean, from that, yeah, we do have some support. The parks, I think from the park standpoint, from what I understand, and when they communicate with the site managers, I think they just don't want to be hassled by other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, because I'm sure there's probably going to be a few Kevins and some Karens out there that are going to really raise some hell that is unnecessary for the situation that be. Now, so with the parks, do they give you a certain time to hunt, or do you guys follow state laws, or is it different between that and if you were to go on public land?
No, so we'll stick with the state laws.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that we can't do in Pennsylvania, anytime where there's if anybody's out there, don't quote me on this, because our laws change constantly. If you were required to wear orange to hunt, we're not allowed to hunt in the park.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because you don't want to be sticking on like a sore thumb.
Yeah. And Yeah, because like for example, muzzleloader season in Pennsylvania is like the second week in October. And I know for archery hunters, you're still required to wear your 250 square inches of orange. So they will just tell you straight up, no, you can't come in the park. I could be wrong. I think they changed that this year, but yeah. And I think the only thing that they do is that we're done. So Allegheny County and Philadelphia County, they'll go to the end of January. Statewide just ended this past Saturday. So that was the end of that in the park system.
Okay. But in your area, you're still allowed to, you're going to be able to finish out to the end of the season, end of January, correct?
Yes, but not in the parks, but there are other areas in the urban.
Okay.
Yeah. So like I said, on Saturday, they shut us down on January 15th, but like tomorrow morning, I'm going to head out because I know there's some other small thickets and, we have some other stands up.
Now with the parks, do you guys have a tag limit per person?
No. So the only thing we do is we are required to shoot a doe first.
Okay. Oh, earn a buck program. Okay.
What's that?
Earn a buck. Wisconsin used to have that a while ago, but then the outfitters got a little pissy about that and yelled at Scott Walker, and they changed that law. It was nice because in order for us to control a CWD, it's like you had to go after does, and then once you shot your first doe, then you can turn that in, then you get your buck tag.
Yeah, they just tell us, make sure you get a doe first. Because we're game control. We're not. They don't want people just waiting for that big buck to walk in front of their stand. That's what they don't want.
Which makes perfect sense. It's like you said, like you mentioned, it's all about the control of the animal. Otherwise, always in your earlier stories, they just become a nuisance, and that's something we don't want to have happen because some deer can be kind of like, if they catch them on the wrong mood, they can be violent. We've seen them on YouTube and such.
Yes, and here in Allegheny County and into the urban areas, I mean, for me, it's sad to see how many that are laying on the side of the road because I got hit by a car. I've had people call me. My neighbor called me a couple years ago. His mom had one drop in her backyard, and he asked me why would that happen. And I thought, you know what, they could have been nosing through somebody's trash looking for food, and could have eaten something that could have poisoned them.
Yeah, that's a good assessment right there, because you never know what they're going to come across, because they're like animals. If they smell something sweet, that to us it's delicious, but for them it's just going to throw their immune system through the roof or twist their gut biome up and just going to send them to the south. Now, when it comes down so how many tags do you as a resident do you have? Do you get to fill? I should say.
So, you mean in the park system or just in general?
Well, how does that work? So do you use the tags that are allocated from the state to fill the parks, or do the park? Okay, so that's how that works. I was wondering if you get a bonus tag or something like that. If there's a different type of table that you get to work off of because you're in a special area.
No, they they just let us file for as many tags as we can through our courthouse.
And how many tags is that for a resident?
That is there. So in Allegheny County, it's not unlimited, but it may as well be. It's like they issued something like 79,000 doe tags this year.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how many tags did you get this year?
I filed for 3. I filled 1.
Yeah, I had 4 tags. I filled 1, but I still have 2 more weeks left. And I was hoping to go out today, but I've been battling this cold, and it's like no sense in adding insult to injury to it. So I just kind of took care of some stuff around, and I got a new phone and then recorded a podcast. So it's like, instead of trying to get because it's went up in the cities, up in Minneapolis, went to a football game. And it's like, I knew I was going to catch something. I just didn't know how bad it would be. I didn't get the pandemic. It was just basically a head cold. And I managed to go through a whole process with that. And now this nice thing is that this weekend I have nothing planned, and it's like right now it's going to be nice and cold. So it's like, I'm going to get out there. I'm going to bundle up and hopefully punch either 2 more doe tags or 1 more buck tag. So it's like, we'll see what walks in front of me.
Yeah, exactly. I will say in the urban areas, it's hard to find buck. it's really difficult. I mean, it's hard enough as it is, because you're hunting these small little areas, 5-6 acres at a time, and they're pretty smart. They'll get around.
I wouldn't doubt it. And so you get in there, like, I'm assuming it's like, when do you know that your hunt is over with when you're hunting in the park?
That, I'll tell you what, that hunting in the park is a very unusual thing. It goes against anything you've ever learned. Number one, like, scent control is never an issue.
Yeah, that's true.
So this year, this was the craziest thing I saw. Is I was up in a tree, and in my area, I have a walking path that goes right around me. And I mean, people never see me up there. And I watched a guy, and I saw probably 20. So in the park, they restrict your shooting to about 20 yards.
Okay.
Because what they don't want, so we have to number. They give us a number. We have to put them on all of our arrows. Mm-hmm. Lose one, we have to report it.
Okay.
So, and that's why I'm trying to stay to 20 yards, and so that I'm always shooting down. I don't want anything going straight. So I'm standing there, and probably 30 yards off to my right shoulder is an area where they feed. And I'm just standing there watching them. And one kind of roams out, and this guy was walking past with his wife, and he saw the deer, and he just, his eyes got huge, and he opened up his phone, and he started videoing this doe and started chasing it around. And she ran right underneath my tree and looked up at me, and I just looked at her like, I don't know. It was the craziest thing. She just stood there, and I'm just like, I don't even know what to say. Here's this doe that's like, well, there's a hunter up here, and there's some lunatic that's chasing me around trying to make a video of me. So it's an unusual experience, but I mean, they're out moving around pretty much all the time. I will say that it'll ruin the discipline of getting up very early.
I could see that happening, but now getting up early and being out there, I'm sure that has to play a high value this way. Then if they're out moving around before nobody else moves around, you're going to be able to take a shot, correct? You feel more comfortable?
Yes. I will tell you, last year I passed up on several of them just because there were people around.
You didn't want to have an audience?
No, and they tell you that because there was there was a bike path. Like I said, I'm in the same spot, and there's a bike path, and this little kid, he was there riding a bike with his dad. And I think his dad spotted me up in the tree, and he went back down the bike path to tell his wife that there was a hunter up there, and he was standing there right on the corner. And here they come walking through. There's about 4 or 5 of them.
Okay.
And I'm like, I am not going to shoot a deer in front of a 9-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny though. It's like out west here. It's like we have, like here in Wisconsin, we can, as soon as the kid can pretty much walk, and if you can figure out how to get them to pull a trigger on a crossbow, they can hunt. I mean, we set the bar so low, so it's like a 9-year-old for us hunting. But then again, you're in an urban scenario, so it's like you don't want them to be turned off from it. So that's kind of a smart thing to do. Because I'm sure, is that something that you guys kind of preach, is like only pull the trigger if you don't have an audience?
Yeah, I would just use your common sense. I'm not going to shoot while there's a whole family watching, because I don't know what they're going to do. And, I don't want them calling and complaining to the park rangers. It was difficult enough as it is, because I'd been approached by several people that will ask me like, hey, can you hunt in this park? And which I tell them no, because, I definitely don't want anybody that hasn't gone through the process just showing up and hanging a tree stand.
True. Then if somebody's actually genuinely curious about it, then do you actually spend a little bit more time and explain the process then? Or do you just kind of just keep it straight and simple? No. Or how do you handle that?
So I try to be an ambassador of the sport. I will stand there and talk to you. I love talking about hunting. I'll answer any question you want to know. I think it just all depends. Like I said, the general guys of the group is, we're supposed to do this without anybody knowing about it, but I don't I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, because in my area, most people, I don't want them to be afraid of what we're doing. I would rather stand there and explain to you why I'm doing what I'm doing. Especially in this urban areas with the growth of anti-hunting sentiment, maybe they could start to understand why it needs to be done.
That is why a lot of us podcasters do this, is because we want to bring on folks like yourself, Matt, to talk about these issues and such, and why it is an asset to have this, because we've been so disconnected from our roots for so many years now. We're going to be coming to a scenario where we're going to have a generation or generations without actually having anybody actually go out there and get their food. Everything is like, you just go to the supermarket and you come back home. That's how it is. And it's like, out when you get in the more rural areas and stuff like that, it's like when you're on a budget and you don't have a lot of income coming in, it's like that's how you trade that off. And now with the price tag of agriculture going up, and how this administration is handling the farming community, like we're going to start seeing a massive increase on our vegetables and our meats. Because like, heck, today went to get a sub, and I was looking at some of the price tags at Subway, and they were almost like $14 for a sub. But it's like, I remember when these were $5. It's like you've seen this dramatic impact already. So it's like some of these restaurants that they thrive off of fresh veggies and fruits, they're not going to survive because the cost is going to be so outlandish.
No, I agree. And I'll tell you, so here in Pittsburgh, it's an interesting area, because as you moved out, there used to be farmland. And we just did a deer drive on Friday. And as we were going through like some of the farther out suburban areas, I'm riding in a pickup truck with an older guy who's telling me, see that new housing plan? That used to be a farm that I used to hunt.
Okay.
And he said, but they sold the land to a developer to build houses. So yeah, even the farms are going away too around here.
It's almost one of those things where if I was a developer in certain areas, like you'd almost want to have a certain element. So this way, that's like you have a way to screen for people that are outdoorsy. It's like you just kind of put in some questions into their application when they're applying and stuff like that. Because this way, then if you're able to structure the community and have some of that ability to have a transfer area and bedding and food areas, like it'd be nice to be able to have your own hunting community. And in this way, it's makes everybody more of a steward of the land, because now they're going to be more diligent about making sure they avoid people dumping garbage, dumping toxic stuff like that. And it's like this way, then you have that element of wildlife. And that's the only downside. It's like, it can only be archery only, but it's going to get people out there, and it's going to get people to maintain that value of the land.
Sure. No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so even the Pennsylvania Game Commission, they promote where you can go to different farms, and that the farmers will tell you, hey, come and hunt on my farm. So for example, believe it or not, at the end of my street is an old farm, and they gave up growing corn years ago.
Okay.
Because it was total loss on their crop because of the deer. So now it's just a big field.
And I take it, do you have permission to hunt out there? Have they given permission to hunt that area?
So this would go along with the anti-hunting sentiment, talking about, going back to when I first got back into this. So yeah, at the end of my street is a farm, and I ran into him one day and I asked him if I could hunt on his property, and he said, absolutely. He said, please get rid of some of these. He went through the whole thing of how they used to farm the land and they can't do it anymore. And I did, I got a buck, really nice one. And his neighbor came out and completely lost it on me and my friend. I mean, they stood there and yelled and screamed and threatened to call the police for hours while we were dragging this out.
Okay.
And, I mean, it would have been actually, I've talked to some of the police officers who would have said it would have been a benefit to you if she would have called, because he said I would have come down and set her straight and said, you can't bother these guys for doing this. If he's allowed to be on his land, it's none of your business. But she never followed through with the threat. But yeah, he does permit me to hunt on the land, but unfortunately, between that and the fact that it is actually next to a golf course, and I talked to one of the guys that runs the golf course, he's head's groundskeeper, and he said, please hunt the land, over there as much as you want. And I said, that's fantastic. I said, so who do I call if one runs onto the course? And he looked at me and said, what do you mean running on the course? And I told him, I've been doing this a long time. When you shoot them, I have no idea where it's going to run.
Mm-hmm.
And he just looked at me and said, I can't have them run on the course. And I said, it's yards that way. There's a good possibility it's going to run on the golf course. And so I'm allowed to go on the land, but I don't, because there's no support.
Yeah, I don't blame you for that, because then all of a sudden you get one that decides to go a different direction, and it's going to run on there. Now it's like, well, now it's like you're going to have to call the cops, because you're going to need somebody to have to play the diplomat, so this way then you can go out there, retrieve it, and come back, or somebody's going to go out there and take it from you, and then it just becomes a problem for it. I ran into a similar situation on my old hunting land over in Minnesota, where it's like I got the permission to hunt the guy. The landowner was absolutely an awesome man. He worked second shift. He didn't give a shit when I showed up. Didn't care if I was out there from sun up to sundown. He appreciated me when I came out there and cleaned up his creek, because there's a creek that ran through it, or cleaned up any of the trees. But then it came down to retiring in 2019, where I lost the opportunity, because now it's like I have to deal with my neighbors. Having you hunt this land was kind of like my way of giving them the finger throughout the entire season. And so it's like, now I'm retiring and now I have to deal with them. So it's like, unfortunately, I'm not going to let you be able to hunt this anymore. It's like, darn it, because I was grooming some massive bucks. I have pictures and videos of them. And it's like, my wife and I had all planned out for our honeymoon, because we weren't going to go on a honeymoon. Our honeymoon was going to go sit for during when we've seen the buck show up on our camera. But then when we go up there to follow up with them and let them know it's what we're doing and stuff like that, and that's when he told me what's going on. It's like, all right, well, I can't fault him for that, but now it's like I'm keeping an eye out on that piece of land to see if I can buy it, because it's only like 5-6 acres, but it's a funnel point, because it's where all the deer like to come and bed. And it's like, if I were to send you a screenshot of it, and you'll see why I love it, because you'll see it open up to this massive forest land, and then it shrinks down to this funnel area. But where the water, at the end of his property, the water goes underneath the land. So for me, it's like, it's perfect, because all it is just run up from the other fields from across the way. And it's like, he loved it, and the other people, there's a few people that enjoyed allowing me to hunt out there, because then it's like I'd be able to go out there and take some deer off the land, so we have to worry about having them when they're coming around the church, because it's a curve, and the deer will come right up out of there and they won't even recognize it. And it's like, if you're not careful, the ditch, it's a 10-foot drop, and it's like, knock on wood, nobody's veered into it, but there have been several deer hit there. I've seen some nice looking bucks, like basket 6 and basket 8s, but not like massive ones, like 130, 140, but just seeing them on the side of the road, it's like, oh, that's unfortunate, but just how it goes. And then they just like, it's funny, it's like they always think the grass is greener on the other side, even though they have everything they need right where they're at.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, I wasn't going to say anything.
So, now, since you hunt in the parks, now, do you shoot a heavier arrow just to have that higher FOC to make that pass through?
That's something that I started doing this year, just in general, because last year I hit one in the brisket and it didn't make it all the way through. And so, yeah, I was thinking about that, just for the fact of, yes. So to the quick answer is yes, I do. I'm now doing Carbon Express pile drivers this year.
Oh, I shoot Carbon Express Maxima Reds. They're a good arrow. Yeah.
Yeah, the pile drivers are pretty good. I was even thinking I was half and half on whether I was going to actually go to the old XX75s.
Oh, you're going heavy.
Yeah, real heavy. But the pile drivers are pretty good. I mean, it zipped through the deer that I got this year. She didn't even know she was hit.
That's how mine was this year too. It's like I bumped. I was shooting right around 450. Well, this year I decided to go up to 550. Shot a deer at 30 yards, went straight through her, and she didn't even act like what she didn't even know what happened. 40 yards, she just piled up, and it rest is history. Now, if I was paying it, if I was actually like I was more focused on the other, because there's two deer that came in. They're basically twins from a litter from a couple years previously, and so I put one through one of the deer, and it's like I had an opportunity to arrow the other one, but I never did. It's like, because it's like, well, maybe I was more focused on the other one, but because it's like you never know when you shoot one, like what's going to come over from a different direction. So, but I made the right decision. So it's like either way, now it's like I have another doe that's going to be hopefully got bred during the rut, and more if not, well, I'm hopefully going to shoot her next year because she's going to pack on a little bit more weight. But yeah, she is zipped straight through at 30 yards and complete pass through, and then it made things really easy to clean up and take care of. I destroyed the heart, but it happens.
Yeah, no, yeah, you gotta love it whenever they drop within sight of your stand.
Oh, that's the best, because like I had the previous landlord, when I shot this buck here, he ran across the fence to the next man's, and he took off and he never came back. My wife and I were sitting there waiting until 10, 11 o'clock at night, but he never came back home. So it's like I have no idea if he went what he did. So it's like, well, we drove all the way back to Wisconsin, got up early in the morning, drove out to his place, knocked on his door. It's like, hey, my deer is back there. Can I go grab it real fast? And it's amazing how well people don't listen, because he says he just don't hunt. He's like, I'm going to go pick up the deer. But it's like, I just needed to go grab it real fast, because he's the Karen that kind of gave my landlord the urgency to kind of end our agreement. So it's like, well, it is what it is, but I was able to go grab it, and he was something. I was really happy with my success with him, and he double lunged him, didn't go all the way through. That's when I learned to go a little bit heavier, and he ran 40 yards, tipped over. The worst part was when I found him that next morning, the coyotes had gotten to him, so they already ripped out his the genitals and ripped out his anal cavity. But it's like it made butchering it really easy, because all I do was cut around the spots that they got into, and now we've been eating up. We finally finished eating him this year. Because I don't know if you do this, but I actually, after I was in processing a deer, I'll put it in a food saver bag and suck all the air out of it, and they'll last a good 2.5, 3 years if you maintain that consistent temperature. Is that something that you do? Have you or?
No, I mean, believe it or not, I usually get 1 or 2 per year, and that'll last me for the entire season. But I rarely have deer meat that lasts more than a year. Soon as I get them, it's like we start making stuff immediately out of them.
As my wife has gotten older, her stomach is just like the cleanliness of the meat just doesn't quite treat her intestines the best. So it's like I can only have it so often.
So, but I did want to follow up on something you were talking about with your, the differences between hunting out in the country versus the urban area is recovering deer. And that's really difficult in the urban areas, because if you don't get a good shot, they can run. And I'm sure, if you scare them off, they can run for a good couple miles.
Mm-hmm.
Now that could be in somebody's yard 3 miles away, and you would have literally no idea where they went. And and that's one of the drawbacks that I don't like about this, because the one that I got in the park this year was a liver shot.
Ooh.
And when I found the arrow, it was just completely red, and I knew I didn't get her in the gut. And but I was on an area that was probably 35 yards from the road that goes through the middle of the park. And she ran the road. I heard all the traffic stop. And then she was up into the neighborhoods.
All right.
And we looked for hours, and we never did find her. But then you start, and on another example, on Friday, somebody got one in our deer drive, and it's, across there behind the grocery store up on the hill or something like that. And, I didn't stick around to see if those guys found it, because we just kept going from drive to drive to drive. And then whenever the day was over, they went back to take a look for it. So I haven't asked them yet if they ever found it. but yeah, that's an interesting thing about the urban hunting is you got to really, it isn't like, you're not going to have 4 or 5 or 6 hours to go and find them, because there's something that can constantly get them up and moving because, like I said, it could be running through traffic. They could lay down in somebody's backyard and then somebody will say, oh, look, there's a deer, and then want to go out and take a look at it and it's up and running again, and then you can technically never find it.
Yeah, that is I've been in your shoes, man. That's not a fun feeling to have because it's like you're just sick because it's like you as an ethical person, it's like you don't want to have them suffer. You want to be quick and painless. So I have a friend of mine here in town that he shoots for whitetail, a 650 grain arrow, because he wants to have that nice 16-inch wound channel. So it's like if he hits in the shoulder blade, it's like it's gonna keep going straight through it. And he owns his own bow shop, so it's like he always gets the latest and greatest Matthews. So but he practices constantly. I mean, he's got an impressive wall of memories. I want to start changing the mounts to memories because I think it can take away the stigma of a trophy because the real trophy is the meat, but what you have on the mount is the memory. And so it's like when you talk about the memory in that way, it can maybe change that ideal about it. Because what like Steve Rinella has done with Meteor, that's what's had this massive influx of hunters because of his cooking show. Essentially, what it is.
No, absolutely. And I love that. And there was a quote on there, because like I have this trophy here. This is the one that I got in Farmer, some of the strings coming off. And what's interesting about this one is this was the one where the lady came out and started yelling at us. That was on the first day of archery. So here we're the 18th of September and it was 80 degrees outside.
Oh man.
Yeah. And like I said, he came down the path. I was just excited. There's something coming in front of me. And then I saw the rack and I'm like, oh my goodness, it's a buck.
That's a good looking rack from what I can see on Zoom here.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know. Do you guys count the brow tines?
We do. Wisconsin does so.
Yeah. So this is 11.
Man, that's a nice looking buck. That's a good, nice looking rack.
Yeah, but to kind of go along with what I remember Steve Rinella said, they were sitting around talking about how the best hunts are the ones where you're miserable while you're doing it. Then you get together with your friends afterwards and you just laugh about it. And that's what me and my friends do about this one is it's 85 degrees. I shot this thing. It ran down into a valley. I stood there and stared at it like, oh, I got to call a couple people. We came out and we were totally unprepared for this. I remember I have like my, safety harness and it has that retention strap and it says for a deer drag. And I wrapped it around the rack and I'm standing there and I'm walking and all I'm doing is kicking dirt up in the air. This thing I remember when I took it into the processor after it was cleaned up after we got it. I think he weighed 190 pounds. Boy. Big. So I'm standing there and then we just decided we were going to try to drag him out by the rack and we were out there and we had to go get the farmer and all kinds of stuff. And we were out there until midnight trying to drag this thing out. We were miserable. We were tired. And to this day, to kind of go back to what Steve Rinella said, every time the three of us get together, that dragging that buck out of the woods comes up. And we just sit there and just laugh. And like, yeah, it's the memories that's what we're doing. We're making memories,
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like this buck behind me, it's like when my wife and I found him the next morning, rigor had fully set in and he decided to get himself back in the cockaburs and stuff like that. So it's like I grabbed his front legs, locked him around the back of his head, and tied them on because I have a backpack type of strap system where it goes over your shoulders, goes in the chest, goes around your waist. Then it has like a 6 foot or 8 foot lead. And so my wife and I had to take form a train. So it's like she's in front of me. I have my hand on her backpack, and she's helping me pull this bastard out. And it was just and it's like I didn't want to butcher it in this guy's back of his property. So I took it all the way through his yard to the other field across because I met the guy that owned that field. He's really nice. And so it's like, I just went all the way through to the other side there and dragged it across. We dragged it for about, I don't know, 250 yards. And we managed to get it done with underneath an hour and a half because it's like, oh my, it was just like the constant hyperventilation. Because it's like, because trying to get his legs to work, and it's like all the trees are all cross woven around. It's like, this is just not fun. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And it luckily there was no snow on the ground, so that would even made it even worse because we shot it beginning of November, and then at that point in time the snow hadn't hit yet.
So yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. Trophies aren't trophies. I don't like, and like I said, my background with my grandfathers both being hunters, I was always raised, as a meat hunter.
Mm-hmm.
This is not about like going and trying to, shoot the nicest buck you can get. If you get a buck, that's fantastic. But I mean, like you said, the trophy's in the meat. To me, it's the experience. It's the whole entire experience. It's not just going out to put something up on your wall.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the best part, because then now it's like the Lord blessed you with an opportunity to put meat on your table for you and your family. But now it's like, I like to take the initiative and invite friends and family over to share it, because now it's like this deer has not only touched my life, but it's infected other people of the good intentions, the good tithing. And then it's like, I found that I feel that if you're able to share the bounty with others, like I feel like my years after I've shot that have been becoming more and more bountiful. And so I do the same thing with fishing. If I had a great year of fishing, I have no issue on giving out fish. And like my dad fishes an awful lot, like especially in April up until it gets too hot, and right around Father's Day is when he quits fishing, and then starts back up again in September until it gets too cold for him. But it's like, he'll give me tons of fish and I'll turn around, I'll give it to other people, because, it's might as well share the good tidings with other folks.
Well, no, absolutely. Especially, with the archery hunting. I mean, I feel I'm blessed that I have a talent, that I developed the talent to be able to do this. So yeah, I don't have a problem sharing it. And I think that sometimes it's like, you make the deer immortal. I will never forget any of the deer that I ever shot, because there's always a great story that goes behind it.
Amen.
But it's terrible to me. It kills me whenever you see a deer just laying on the side of the road because it got hit by a truck.
Yeah. I always tell my friends, it's like, I've gotten to the point where I always carry a knife on me. And it's like, a lot of my friends now do the exact same thing. They have a knife on them. And as I tell them, it's like, if you have an opportunity, or if you can't take care of the deer, somebody let me know. I will, if I'm in a situation where I can quit what I'm doing, I will gladly drop what I'm doing and go help you take care of it, or come to the rescue of it. And if you've called it in for a salvage tag or whatever, do not hesitate to do it, because there's a lot of people out there that would gladly take the initiative to take and butcher it all up and distribute that meat or donate it to it. Like here in Wisconsin, we have and I'm sure I think it's pretty much across the board, where they have food programs for food shelters and stuff like that. And I think Wisconsin's up to like 5 or 6 million tons of food or deer or venison meat that people have donated just in our state. And not that, I have no idea what Missouri or Iowa or even Pennsylvania, because I mean, your guys' hunting community for archery is massive.
Oh yeah. Yes. I think I remember reading last year, Pennsylvania has the most hunter licenses issued in the entire country. And that's another popular, just because when you get into the middle of the state, more into the state game lands, they're really getting hunted out. I've been up there a few times with a few friends rifle hunting, and we don't really see much of anything up there.
Yeah, it's almost like it has its brown is down type theory. And if you come into a winter that's deadly cold, or like really, really cold, like Minnesota went through a deep freeze back in 2013, was I think at the end of it was like Minneapolis saw 120 days below zero. I mean, it decimated the deer population. Where I lived at the time in Rochester, Minnesota area, we hit 99 days below. Then on top of that, add the snow to it, and we saw big, massive, drastic changes. Like in 2012, we were able to get 5 tags, and then 2013 hit, and we only got a maximum of 2 tags, a buck and a doe tag. That's it. where the year before, it's like we could have a group of guys out there and we can clean house for the amount of deer. And then now our numbers are here in the Midwest are skyrocketing again because our winters are cold, but we're not seeing those 15 to 30-day stretches. And like today was 32 degrees outside. So there's a lot of deer, a lot of turkeys. And I'm just driving between West Salem, Wisconsin to La Crosse. That's 5 miles. I've probably seen 24 turkeys and a bunch of whitetail out walking around.
Wow. Yeah. Here in Pennsylvania, I mean, the winters don't get around Pittsburgh. The winters don't get too bad as you get farther north. I mean, because you get up to close to Erie, you're almost in Canada at that point.
Yeah.
It gets cold up there. But yeah, here down in Pittsburgh, I mean, we just got hit with that winter storm. So, as it's moving out, I think tomorrow is going to be pretty good, but it's going to get down to close to zero for just a few days. But I mean, geez, we're what, January 20th?
Mm-hmm.
6 more weeks of winter, and then we'll start warming up a little bit.
Yeah, it's like it's amazing how like our winters are almost tailored. There's like it can almost feel like there's a sense of manipulation that's going on, especially if you put your tinfoil hat on, you start digging into weather patterns that they've developed since like the 30s and the 40s all the way up until today. It's ridiculous, but it's quite strange though, because like I remember growing up in the early 90s, we're having already a couple of feet of snow by time wood hits like November, by the beginning of the rut. And now it's like we're not seeing snow until after the first of the year. It's like it's just frustrating. It's like what I've noticed here, like last year, really showed its true colors with the lack of snow that we've seen up in Duluth and such. Because if they don't get their 120 to 150 inches of rain or snow, excuse me, our water levels as it goes down through Minnesota into Iowa into Illinois, they're much lower, and it's really shown that it's hurting the fish population. We're not seeing the regrowth that we normally do. The fish sizes are not as big as they are. Like my dad did the least amount of fishing this past summer that he's done in probably like 10-15 years. He's been retired for 10.
Yeah, here in Pennsylvania, the craziest thing that's starting to happen now is it's not necessarily the winters. It's summer seems to be going a lot longer around here, because archery season starts usually the third Saturday in September.
Okay.
And this year, so it'll start cooling off October 15th or something like that. Geez, even through Halloween, it was still up into the 70s.
Wow, that's really warm because we were actually on average about in the 40s or 50s. So
yeah, it really pushed the rut really far back into November. Yeah, it's really odd, but yeah, it's interesting how the weather kind of affects, the deer patterns. Because I know I've met, shooting some 3D tournaments, I've met some people that are down south that will tell you that their rut it's got to be when it's cooler.
Yeah,
so
I have some friends that hunt that live in Alabama and Louisiana, and their rut is over, or it's about ready to start, depending on where they're at. Because you're right. It's like even their cooler weather is showing up later in the season too for them.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. But yeah, I mean, here in Pittsburgh, we've always had pretty mild weather, so that's probably why in the more southern areas like Allegheny, Greene, and because we're almost in West Virginia. I'm probably about 45 minutes from there. And yeah, so our winters are pretty mild down here.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like I almost want to have those colder, harsher winters again, just to have that quality again, and it just overall has a more of a balance in the ecosystem. And I don't know. It's like what we're here in the Midwest, we're starting to see some of the so I'm looking for some of the sins of our forefathers starting to show up. Like we have 3M in Minneapolis, and because of their dumping that they did and their lack of and they didn't know what was going on, a lot of that poison is now starting to show up in the lakes around Minneapolis. And there's like, I think the DNR announced in December or so that there is something like 23 lakes that are inedible. You can't eat any of the fish out of them because they're so toxic.
Oh.
And the worst part is like we have one massive flood that's going to hit right into the Mississippi Delta, and that's just going to just trickle down all the way down to Louisiana. And it's just not going to be a good sign. So it's like, and plus it's like, you don't know what's going to come out of the sludge of Ohio and Pennsylvania from the iron. You know, there's a lot of issues we're going to be seeing here pretty soon, because if we don't start focusing on the quality of our water, we're going to see a deterioration of all around, because that poison is going to get into our blood system or our bloodstream, and along with all the wildlife around it. So we could see a massive die-off.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we even have issues like that with our trout stocking. You know, I grew up in an area where, you know, there was a bunch of abandoned coal mines, and, you know, we usually, so like we were discussing winter, we always get hit with one big last snow in like March.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, if it can get substantial, the trout season here opens up, I think it's like the second Saturday of April. And if we get a bunch of snow and then it melts all at one time, it floods all the creeks, gets into the abandoned mines, and then washes all that sulfur into those fresh creeks. And I remember a few times where it killed all the trout that they stocked.
Oh man, that's a lot of money just down the drain.
Oh, it was terrible walking along there and just seeing just dead fish laying everywhere. Yeah.
It's just so frustrating, you know. And luckily, we haven't seen any massive kill-offs. Knock on wood, but you never know what could happen. I know the DNR and a lot of the community in these areas have tried to put a lot of energy into cleaning everything up. I know, like we have a small community here called French Island, and because of the airport, it polluted their tap water, the groundwater, and so now they actually have to get bottled water in because it's so toxic from all the fuel and stuff like that they had to ingest. And then the worst part is that's sitting right on next to the Mississippi. So one massive flood to come through could just really wreak havoc in the area. And over in this area right here, it's like the bass is we're such a hot spot for Bass Pro. They'll bring in the Bassmaster Classic Elite Series to come into here, and they'll fish for a week. And it's like, we don't want to lose that, because that brings a lot of tourism dollars on top of like, it's something exciting to see.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, what is so now you have 2 more weeks left of your season. So how are you? So now the hunting in parks is over with, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So how the state that is with Allegheny. So they break us up into what they call wild WMUs, or wildlife management units. And Pittsburgh and Philadelphia are the most populated ones. So they extend our season two weeks later, but for the rest of the state, they finished up on Saturday. So yeah, Allegheny County, I have 2 more weeks.
Now, do you have a couple of spots that you're going to be able to hit and hopefully punch your last 2 tags?
Yes. And it was funny. I was just talking to a friend of mine. We have a spot. It's about 3 or 4 acres. A friend of mine, I don't understand this as a diehard hunter, but he has about 4 acres of great land, and he just doesn't like to hunt.
Okay.
He shoots art. I met him. We shoot 3D tournaments together, but he just doesn't want to go through the effort. So he gave me permission to hunt on his property, and we hung a stand there, and nobody's been in that stand since November.
Okay.
So that area has been unpressured for the last 3 months. So I'm hoping when I get there tomorrow and maybe this week, they'll, be back to their normal, probably something similar to like what happens on the first week of your season. They're unpressured completely. So they kind of walk around carefree now because there's nobody out there bothering them.
I'm hoping you'll be able to encounter some. Now, we just finished up a holiday hunt as of January 1st, and so it was only gun only, and you can only do antlerless only. So it's like in the area that I like, the place I have scouted out where I kind of have them patterned. There was a lot. There was always somebody out there throughout that. I think it's like 6 days for the gun hunting for rifle season, and so I was like, well. I went out there with my dad and my daughter on New Year's, and we just saw tracks everywhere. It's like, well, this is not, I'm not going to be able to visit this place until pretty much this weekend, when I know that the pressure's off. It's only going to be the diehards that are going to be out there this weekend, or in the last weekend before the season's over with. So hopefully I'll be able to connect with something and set up a spot. I found a couple different trails that I want to mix it up with. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to, I'll be able to capitalize on another deer and have another one to the freezer.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah.
So now, do you only have your Instagram, or do you have a YouTube channel yet, or how is where do you see your online presence going with your urban?
So hopefully, yeah, I don't have a YouTube channel yet, but that's in the works. Is that, hopefully getting to, because I mean, it's interesting. I never thought, a lot of people would be interested in the idea of the urban hunting. I know there's so much hunting out there, but hopefully I'm going to get a YouTube channel up where, we're going to be filming some of the hunts and kind of talking about what it's like to do urban hunting. And, like I said, I see that it's going to expand, and I'd like to, help some people. And, and I've done that with some of my friends, is that, trying to get them into the idea of how do you do this? How do you get into the urban aspect? Because I know it isn't as easy as going out and buying a license and going out and pitching some tree stands. There's a lot of other things you have to worry about, especially with, gaining permission. And because, here in Allegheny County, if you looked at a map, I think every piece of land is owned by someone. So, moving forward, yeah, hopefully I'm going to get a YouTube channel started and, get some hunts recorded, and so that everybody can check it out.
Awesome. So where can people find you at then well, I've mentioned your Instagram. So do you have anything else? Do you want to mention that I haven't?
No, not right now. I mean, I just tell everybody to keep an eye on my Instagram account, and I'll be posting my YouTube channel up there pretty soon.
Fantastic, man. Well, thank you for coming on, Matt. I really learned a lot about how you approach the urban hunting and how you guys want to navigate the waters of dealing with the anti-world. But I'm glad you guys are able to have a community and have the blue back you guys. This way, then you have that, you can maintain that relationship and continue hunting for years to come.
Yeah, great. Hey, well, it was great. It was a lot of fun. I'm glad you had me on. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
I'm Jake with HHA Sports, and today we're going to talk a little bit about our dovetail sights and how they're going to fit on the new Mathews V3X. So as you'll see, I have a Tetra Max Tournament Edition sight on this 33-inch V3X. All of our dovetail sights, the Tetra and the Tetra Max, will fit on the V3X. Also, in the next couple of weeks, you'll see us come out with a shorter dovetail version. It'll just be our short bar version, which will also fit on the V3X on both the 29 and 33-inch model. One question that we've gotten pretty frequently lately is the windage adjustments on your Tetra and Tetra Max bow sights on the new Mathews bow. And this year we came out with the infinite adjust plate, which you'll see on the front end of your sight. So when you put this infinite adjust plate on, you'll want to either flip it to the inside or the outside. And for the inline mounting sight options, such as the V3X, you're going to want to make sure that the infinite adjust plate is to the outside of your infinite adjust channel. This will allow for optimal windage adjustments. So you'll also be able to find the infinite adjust bracket on our website if you're already shooting a Tetra or Tetra Max Tournament Edition sight. Another way that you can get your HHA to fit V3X is by buying our conversion kit, which you can find on our website at hhasports.com. We'll be selling those at retail around $60. So basically the only thing you'll have to do is you'll have to take apart your sight at the third access point, and you can convert any Tetra or Tetra Max sight. So if you have a fixed frame, you can get that into a dovetail. So like mentioned before, any dovetail sight will fit a Tetra or a Tetra Max, as well as our short bar version. For more information, you can visit our website at www.hhasports.com.